name is Max Stein, and I love the Super Nintendo.
My name is the Megabuck. I also love the Super Nintendo.
My name is Rafa Boy, and I love the Super Nintendo.
Hey guys, Vinny here. I can't say enough great things about the Super Nintendo. I'm excited. Let's do this, Mac.
And welcome to the Game Treasure Podcast, where we discuss treasured games of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Except, no, we don't. Once again, not today. Today, we are... I'm so fucking excited, you guys.
Me too.
Today, we're just talking about one video game console. We're talking about...
there she is.
The greatest video game console, arguably, in my opinion. The PlayStation 2 rivals it, I'd say, but the Super Nintendo Entertainment System is the game that I am referring to, or the console that I'm referring to.
Same diff.
Today, we're doing another console carousel of the Super Nintendo. We're picking our top 5 favorite games for this incredible console. Guys, this was hard. Was this hard for you guys?
Really hard, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I would
This was
say
definitely a
for
good
me,
one.
it was just like, can they all be number one? I mean,
Like
Kinda.
my list, with the exception of like my top 2, you could have taken number 3, 4, and 5 and probably shuffled them around with 10 other games and it would have been a valid list.
exactly, honestly.
Yeah.
And it was also one of those things where I'm going, God, any one of these things like could deserve an entire episode. Like how much do we want to burn on some of this stuff? Because God damn, some of these games are so good that many of them broach my top 5 of all time. At least the
Yeah,
top
dude.
10 list for
Yeah.
sure. It's
I'm gonna have to shut myself up.
to talk about our before we get into the history of the Super Nintendo, I think we should start with our own personal connections once again to the console. The Super Nintendo was my shit. As stated in our NES Carousel episode, I had the Nintendo in my room, and the Super Nintendo stayed in the living room for a while because that shit was that good for that long.
Yeah.
It was so packed with games started to look like cartoons, which when you're a kid, like you were like, I'm playing a fucking cartoon. Like what? The 90s is crazy. Like I am so fond of this console. I felt like it hit me at a fantastic age. It was perfect for me. Buck, how do you feel about the Super Nintendo?
Yeah, which is funny because the age difference, because it hit me perfect as well too. I remember playing the demo kiosk, playing Super Mario World in like department store or Walmart or something as a kid, and just going, it looks so much better. I thought it couldn't look any better than Mario 3.
Better.
How does
Seriously.
and it looks, and then I got to play it and it was like Mario feels so good and it's so smooth, and oh my gosh, I gotta Mom, I need a Super Nintendo. Mom, I need a Super Nintendo.
Mommy, never needed anything so badly in my life. Raph, how about yourself?
Dude, I mean, the Super Nintendo, like, the Nintendo was the first game console that I ever played, but the Super Nintendo was the one that was the console. Like, that was the thing I fell in love with that thing, and I still love it, like, to this day, to the point where I'm still seeking out games for the system. I bought that Hyperkin just because I wanted to replicate the feeling of playing it on the hardware, and it's probably my favorite video game console of all time with a few exceptions. I don't know, man. I think it's a perfect little system. I love it.
I agree.
on my heart.
Mr. Venecor.
Oh my gosh, SNES will forever be my number one best boy of all time when it comes to video game systems, and I think it's because the advance, the jump in performance and graphics and just visual for us as kids, because this go from 8-bit to 16-bit. It's like Buck said, it's like all of a sudden the graphics on screen are just as good as any cartoon that you're watching on TV.
Oh, yeah.
And that you couldn't say that about the NES. The NES was definitely not that. Like when you look at the difference between Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 4, I mean,
Hell.
that's all I have to say.
I mean, we did our NES console just a couple of weeks ago, and I was, some of the games in their later life cycle of the NES were pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But you're so right, where it's just like, no, like, man, like the leap, the doubling, it's
Oh, it's just
astronomical.
beyond, man. And then you had things coming out like the Super FX chip. We were seeing polygon graphics for the very
yeah.
first time.
mind blowing.
You were getting arcade games now, like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2 were
That were
starting to come
just
out.
as good as at least to me, they felt like playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Turtles in Time. Not on my list today.
Oh,
Almost
Turtles
made
in
it though.
Time.
Kind
it
of
was
thing
this
where
close.
just as fucking good
Yeah.
at home. Just as good.
I feel that, man. I feel
Yeah.
that, Ref.
Rented that game several times from Blockbuster. Oh my goodness.
It's my toe. Oh my god. So to get a little history, or maybe a lot of history, hopefully, on the Super Nintendo, we are going to our in-game historian, the Mega Buck. Buck, please.
Hey, kids
Take
and
it away.
kiddos. For your enjoyment here, a little history about the Super Nintendo. So, this bad boy right here.
Mwah.
To compete with the popular, we have to go back in time and look at where we were in time now, right?
Back
so the
in
Nintendo's been out.
time.
That's right. The Nintendo sold the Famicom and the Nintendo have sold a bajillion copies at this point. So the home console market is now legitimately a thing after Atari and some others almost destroyed it, especially in America. So NEC Electronics, pretty big in Japan. They made the PC Engine, aka the TurboGrafx. Later came to the States. Sega followed suit with the Mega Drive in '88. So now we're only talking a couple of years after the NES's arrival. A lot of people forget that. The Genesis was not created to compete with the Super Nintendo. It was created to squash the NES, is what Sega was trying to do. PC Engine was also superior, but we all know that just didn't take off as much there as well, too. These are both 16-bit consoles. They could just do more things, right? So Nintendo was in no rush to do another console. They weren't even sure that was going to be a thing, right? Remember when we talked about sequelitis for the games back then?
Right.
Yeah.
Put yourself in Nintendo's shoes. Do we make another console? How does it work? Are the games different? It's better architecture. It's different. Can it play the games from the other one? No, because we're still selling that console. So we probably don't want to do that. But
I
they
didn't
started.
even think about that.
Yeah.
The idea of the first sequel console being
That's
like, what
what
the
this
fuck do
is.
we do?
For them, it
Remember the
Oh,
commercial?
yeah.
Genesis does what Nintendo does.
But we have to remember
But
this.
then don't. Yeah.
The Genesis was not Sega's first console. The Genesis was a
Right.
sequel console for them because they made the Master System. And they
Oh,
made
right.
3
That's
iterations of the
right.
Master System, form factoring it and changing it and making it smaller and
Mhm,
everything else
mhm.
too. So again, they'd made that better. And there's a lot of Master System games that look just as good as NES games, if not better, like Double Dragon, for instance. So the Genesis, again, made to compete with the NES. So what happened was Nintendo started to see their market share in the home console market start to slip. So they went, okay, we have to take this seriously, start developing the Super Nintendo. So the Super Famicom in Japan, you'll remember the NES is called the Famicom in Japan.
Mhm.
The Super Famicom, it would first draft energy, as Raph says.
Coin that.
It's
That will never
super.
get old.
It's
That will
very
never
What
get
do you
old.
want? It's super. So the Super Famicom and a redesigned version, designed by the same gentleman that redesigned the NES in America, redesigned the Super Nintendo for America as well. Retailed for $199, equivalent to about $450 in today's money. Launched in September 9th, 1991 with 2 games, Super Mario World and F-Zero.
Okay.
That was all
2
you
bangers.
needed, right?
God damn.
Yeah. 2
Yep.
bangers.
Now, a funny thing to touch on in Nintendo, if you remember, I talked about in our NES carousel that this Nintendo seal of quality was a big deal to Nintendo, right? And making sure that the games were good. They actually internally vetted them, and that's why there's weird ones like the Bible games and the Tengen games that flew under their radar came out anyway. Nintendo actually continued to do that internally. Turns out they actually had a 40-point scoring scale that they used just inside Nintendo of America HQ, and they actually used it to divvy up their marketing dollars. the way that they chose to market Super Nintendo games, the ones that weren't first party ones, and how they would, if they ended up on a box, if they ended up in a bundle, if they ended up being, we had Nintendo, there were non-Nintendo games on the back of that box with box art and other things, right? Even though most were first party Nintendo games as well too.
Mhm.
It's funny enough too, as they were trying to launch this console, one of the things that Venny mentioned earlier about Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 had a real challenge being converted to the Genesis. So the Super Nintendo version actually beat the Genesis version to the market by almost a year.
Oh shit! Really?
And so the first one, World Warrior, and then
I remember that
Championship, that was a
That
big
was a
deal
big
for Nintendo.
deal. That was a big
that's-
deal.
Wow.
That was a big deal to
That's
get
a
them.
huge game, and you miss out on it
Yes.
for a year.
Yes. But then what happened? A little thing that we talked about in our previous episode, Mortal Kombat happened. And when Mortal Kombat happened, Nintendo took that less violent stance,
the gray blood,
censored it with the sweat.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
But you're right, though. It's what it was. They just palette swapped the colors of it, right?
Yeah.
So coincidentally, the resulting of that was the Genesis version outsold the Nintendo version 3-1.
By a lot. By a whole lot.
I had no
A B
idea.
A C
I
A B
didn't know
B
that.
baby.
And so once the
Blood
ESRB was formed, it gave Nintendo a little bit more freedom to go, okay, we don't have to police the content of the games the same way we have to police the quality of the games, right? The ESRB does that now, so we can wash our hands of it. And so when Mortal Kombat 2 came out and it got a mature rating, they didn't have to do all that stuff to it. They were able to get away with it in that respect. Then start coming along games where they did more and more 3D, like Kyle mentioned, the FX chip, other things too. But then Donkey Kong Country was actually said to be one of the games that really launched the Super Nintendo through the roof there. Now, there's something in history here that's really worth noting, even though it's going forward to near the middle of the Super Nintendo's life cycle. TurboGrafx and Sega competing a lot more than TurboGrafx, both would move on to make CD add-ons for their consoles. The Turbo Duo CD and the Sega CD, right?
I know where you're
Which
going
we've
with this.
affectionately talked about some of them. So we've all heard about it, right? That Nintendo partnered up with Sony to make a Nintendo PlayStation, and that a prototype surfaced few years back, sold for bagillions of dollars. It was one of the only ones known to be in existence of that. The main reason cited for that deal falling apart is because Nintendo realized partway through the process that would mean that Sony and the PlayStation would have full control over the game library by giving them the technology, the way the deal was going to work out and the way the technology was. So that wasn't going to work out for Nintendo. That's not how Nintendo swings. And then, as some of you may or may not know, Nintendo then went to Philips and said, well, then we're going to develop our CD system with the CDI then, and we're going to make this CDI system with them.
Infamous.
Yes. My boy.
And what started to happen was, look, I love the Sega CD, and the Turbo Duo is a fun console too, even though it had a lot of them. But the Sega CD ended up having a good amount of shovelware on it. It had a good amount of games that were not so great. And Nintendo saw this and they went, you know what? Between that and the loading times that these things have, I don't think we're going to go this route. The deal with Philips was so far along. That is the reason why there's 2 Zelda games and a Mario game for the CDI, because it was far enough into development.
Terrible ones.
That's Philips got to go, well, you gave us the rights to make some games, so we're making them and we're selling them.
Hell yeah.
So that's where you get the Mario Hotel and Zelda Wand of Gamelon. And
I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok.
They were pretty
Right?
bad.
Yeah.
Every once in a while,
oddly
I use
enough-
the phrase, my boy. It's from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, and as the rumor goes, it's also said that Sony went to Sega after Nintendo shut down the deal to try and develop the PlayStation with Sega also. And Sega said, thanks, but no thanks. We're working on Project Dural, which ended up becoming the Saturn.
Oh.
And then Sony said, fuck it. We're just going to make our own.
Right.
But fine, we'll do. And that's a story for another day. But
We covered that a little bit in our Final Fantasy VII episode.
Right.
That's
Go
right.
back and
And-
feel free to listen to that.
And as I always like to, I college Game Boy Advance was a big thing. If you don't have a Game Boy Advance or don't play a lot of Game Boy Advance games, the Game Boy Advance is basically the Super Nintendo 2. They ported so many Super Nintendo games to the Game Boy Advance. It's really Final Fight 1 and so many others that they did. The SNES was not discontinued in America until 1999 and in
Ooh.
Japan in 2003.
Wow.
Wow. 03?
Yeah, I know.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Would you like to know the top 10 best-selling games for the Super Nintendo?
I'd love to.
Best selling?
I don't have to tell you the number of copies if you don't want to draw it out, but I can tell you the top 10
that's okay.
best-selling games.
Yeah, tell me the top 10 best selling.
Number 10, Donkey Kong Country 3, 3.5 million.
Okay.
Number 9, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, 4.1 million. Number 8, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, 4.12 million. Number 7, Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, 4.6 million. Donkey Kong Country 2, 5.15 million. Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior, 6.3 million copies. Number 4, Super Mario Kart, 8.8 million copies. Number 3, Donkey Kong Country, 9.3 million copies. Number 2, Super Mario All-Stars, 10.5 million copies.
Okay.
And by further extension, Super Mario World, 20.1 million copies.
Does that count in the pack-in, like, or no, those are just separate sales?
This shows separate sales probably wouldn't include would not include console sales, I don't think, because the Super Nintendo ended up selling right around, I think, 45 or 46 million consoles. Not as much as the NES by far, but still a huge number.
Wow. God damn.
And it got a redesign too, just like the Nintendo did later in its life in the mid-90s. It got a SNES Junior, as they call it, which is just a form factor redesign.
Yeah, I don't remember having that one as a kid. I don't even remember seeing that one until much later in life.
The biggest deal about these two, I don't remember. I think we owned this while I still lived in the house there too. But you know what the biggest thing about this one was? The redesign back to a top loader like they did in all of them was really because that toaster thing backfired with the teeth and the way that thing worked. But if you'll notice on the Super Nintendo when they did that, they went, getting these carts out is hard.
Got a button.
Eject button.
They invented the eject button.
Which,
I
if you
love
look
that
inside here, it just pushes two little plastic tabs up. It's just like an actuator, and it just helps you pop them out without yanking on them.
Yeah.
Nice.
They didn't feel the need in the redesign. That's all I had on history of Super Nintendo.
That's fantastic. I wanted to point out the difference in form factor of the Japanese versus the American version of this console.
Yeah.
Namely, that Japanese people, I guess, think that we don't like colors or something.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, I guess the American executives think that we don't like colors because they chose to swap the wonderful, yellow, green, red, blue.
Yeah.
It was in the logo also. The Super Famicom logo is the same.
Yeah, for just two different shades of purple. And they changed the rounded, sleek form factor of the Japanese to this square, boxy, like
the European one looks like the Japanese one.
It's
also.
like they're trying to be very 90s, and it's really disappointing. Mostly, I realized they missed out on the.
It's like a Taco Bell booth from like 1996.
Right.
Sitting
Yes,
at the
it's
Taco
way of putting
Bell.
it.
That same purple.
That's funny.
The purple color of the Super Nintendo is as iconic as those styrofoam cups, those wavy
With the
styrofoam
squiggly.
cups. Yeah, like
Squiggly.
that's tell me you lived through the 90s without telling me, and it's
first-
those two things.
Yes.
Yeah.
The legit 90s wave is that squiggly.
Yes.
Unmistakably. It's
And,
a whole vibe.
You know, I wanted to point out that they missed the opportunity to have color coordinated buttons, which is an idea that, by the time you get to PlayStation, it's a given, right? X is purple, circle is red, triangle. So
was.
now
Not
when you're
anymore.
doing commands, right, that's true. Well,
Press X. Why do you think I'm so confused?
Xbox still uses colors, for example. And it's one where when you're doing game instructions, you can use colors to inform people instead of. And it's interesting. And they lost that opportunity when you switch to all purple. Just pointing that out. I thought that was interesting.
There are 4 different consoles with an X button, and they're all in
different spots.
all in a different spot in the top, left, right, bottom.
Yeah.
It's wild.
There's
ridiculous.
a reason why whenever we play Barony on
well-
the Switch that I can't handle like the X, like it always messes with my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, because Nintendo does it the wacky way where X is on top. Oh, I also wanted to point out. Thank you for that. Reminds me. Raph,
Oh yes, that's
I
right.
will
We
say
talked
that
about it the other day.
the Super Nintendo controller form factor pretty much becomes the principal form factor for video game controllers forever.
Yeah.
You have 4 face buttons, and they are arranged in a cross pattern on the right side, and then you have a D-pad on the left side with 2 shoulder buttons, if not more, right? And that's it. This is pretty much what controllers are.
That
Pretty
D-pad
crazy.
originally came from Master System had it, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't a plus sign. The D-pad came from Nintendo also, but not from where you think. It wasn't from the NES. It actually came from the Game & Watch series. Donkey Kong and a couple of those were the first games that they put the plus sign D-pads on, and then migrated that to the Nintendo when they did it because it worked out so well for controls.
Son of a bitch, I didn't know that. But yeah, Super Nintendo, very interesting history. Thank you, Buck. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get into our carousels.
Yeah.
All right. We're back. Gentlemen, holy shit, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to take my turn.
My God.
Listen, viewer, if you've watched a console carousel before, we've explained this. These are not necessarily the best Nintendo games of all time, per se. We're not in the business of deciding what is the best, right? This is if we had a carousel in a diner that was filled with our 5 favorite Super Nintendo games, this is our carousel, right? With that being said, so many of these games are equally as good as one another. It's very hard to decide to order them in any capacity. There's constantly swapping in my mind which one is better than the other. Yeah. And a lot of us too, like we all love the same. It's hard not for all of us not to be like linked to the past. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's just like we did a little bit of curating to try to not all pick the same games, but some of these games are just so universally beloved. It's hard, but we think we do have a nice variety here. But there might be some overlap, so don't get angry at us because that's just how it goes. Okay?
We had to compromise in our little Discord chat. We're like, okay, I get this.
Right,
okay, I'm going to drop this off my list.
Everybody
but I
gets
reserve
2
the right
bangers.
To I reserve the right to this one because he wanted that.
I think the best way of putting it is not necessarily even our best games. It's like, for me, this list is games that I played a lot growing up or that I discovered as an adult that just mean a lot to me. You know what I mean? Like some of them aren't really even particularly great, but yeah, no, they just mean a lot to me, you know?
All right, let's get it started. Got my timer here. I'm going to give myself a 15-minute timer.
We get 1 hour each? Oh,
well, yeah, right, yeah. And here we go. Okay, listen, y'all. The way I pick this game, because when it comes to making these lists, you have to decide what is going to be my criteria to pick these games. When you have this many kick-ass games, I'm deciding in my carousel with this countdown, I want it to be games that I can, if someone has never played the Super Nintendo, I want to point to them and say, this is some of the best stuff that gaming has to offer. And I usually want it to be something that I have interacted with, of course. This is our carousels, okay? Number 5, Mario Paint.
Oh, man.
If you go check our rainy day episode, you can hear me gush forever about Mario Paint. I'm not going to go on and on about it today because I want to spend a lot more time in the back half of my list. But long story short, it's a game where you get to play with a little mouse peripheral, a literal left click, right click mouse peripheral on a little trackpad. Buck Day, thank you. And things you can do in Mario Paint: color, draw, make cartoons, make music using MIDI stuff. It was super kid friendly, and for me as a child, I was just like Mario Paint all day. You can't lose. Also, you can swat flies to death. I think I mentioned that in the episode as well. It's very fun. All right, moving on.
Yeah, still, yeah.
Number 4. Number 4. Kirby Superstars.
Oh, baby.
Ooh, baby. What a good motherfucking game. The reason this game is so good is because it's 7 games. Yeah, exactly. Kirby Superstars is a collection of Kirby games. One thing I want to say about it right off the get-go, this 16-bit look is perfect for Kirby. It's literally the best he's ever in the Nintendo era, in the Game Boy. It's like, yes, he's round, he's cute, whatever, but by this time he is a cartoon. And then any time after this, he's too round, like he's too he's too, like, you know what I mean, computerized. But at this game, it's perfect. It's broken into these 7 mini games. I'm not going to break them all down. Basically, a lot of them are just little Kirby games. Like one of them is kind of like a Metroidvania Kirby game. This one features a small Meta Knight level that's like got the craziest like tone shift ever, because the whole game is super cute, and then the Meta Knight thing happens and it begins with like a bunch of people gazing out of a spaceship like as it's crashing, and it's just like, what the fuck is happening? But more importantly, there are 2 mini games in this game, one of which is called Megaton Punch, where in which basically you're doing 3 like timing mini games in a row, and it's you as Karate Kirby versus like all the other melee enemies in the game, and you like, it's basically test your might, but instead of tapping you're timing, and like when you get the timing really right, the camera pans out like Dragon Ball Z and shows like the whole planet like split depending on how hard you hit the thing. It was so satisfying as a kid. And then the other one was Samurai Kirby.
Samurai Kirby.
Yes, dude, which is basically
so cool.
It's another timing game, but instead of this time being like 3 different like visual timing games, it's an auditory like timing game, because there's like just like it's you and Kirby, or it's you as Kirby versus the different enemies in the game, and you are across from one another like a Chambara samurai film, and you have your swords tucked away, and then it's like holding you for an indeterminate amount of time, and then there's a snap that goes off, and when the snap goes off you have to press A, and whoever presses it first kills the other one. I played it for
Awesome.
hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and so that makes my list. Number 3. This is where we're getting serious, okay? Because my top 3 games could all be my number 1 game, frankly.
Same. Yeah.
But I'm putting this one at number 3 because at the end of the day, this one is a pretty simple game, albeit one of the best games of all time, one of my favorite games of all time, my absolute favorite platformer of all time,
I know what
Donkey Kong Country.
Baby.
Oh my
choice.
fucking god. This game is, I'm gonna get a tattoo for this game. It's, first of all, it's the game I've beat the most on my list. I've beat it probably half a dozen times. I once was at a party in college in South Florida, blackout drunk in a random FIU dorm, and a friend of mine said, "They have Donkey Kong Country." And we commandeered the TV, and from 3 a.m. till the sun coming up, we just played Donkey Kong Country by ourselves and ignored the party completely. This game is the tightest. It feels so tight. To this day, I replayed this game as early as like 2 years ago with a friend of mine and still went, yep, tight as a goddamn drum. This game is literally, there's a quote I discovered while doing research that the guy who was the main designer of this game literally said, we painstakingly designed this game so that players with excellent timing can go from the beginning of the level to the end of the level just in one go, just without stopping. And you can feel it.
Oh, it's so good.
You can feel it when you play it, and and it's doubly effective because the music in this game is some of the best music in any video game ever. Specifically, a song that to this day, I had to make a TikTok for this, okay? For this podcast. And on TikTok and on Instagram, I see boomers using a song all the time that there's no way they know. And by boomers, I mean Zoomers. There's no way that they know what it's from. And it's one of, if you're a gamer, it's one of the most beloved video game songs of all time.
Aquatic Ambiance.
There it is.
This song gives me goosebumps to listen to. I can't, look at this. This song,
Music to my
there is a 10-hour, I'm gonna cry talking, like literally thinking about how good this video game is. There's a 10-hour version of this track, and sometimes when I'm just in the morning drinking coffee, I'll just listen to it.
You guys,
This game is one of my most beloved games of all time. Super Mario, I get it. Super Mario World, to be specific, I get it. You got all the secret stuff, right? You've got levels that you don't know exist, so you have to replay the game, and you read Super Nintendo, or you read Nintendo Power, you hear from your friends, so you go back and you do. But none of that in Donkey Kong Country. In Donkey Kong Country 2, they add like a second, everyone gets an ability. No. In Donkey Kong Country, it's just jumping. It's just running and jumping. It is a pure gaming experience. It's one of the. If you haven't played it, go play it. People, I swear to God, this is real. There are people online that'll be like, it's really not that good. If you should really play Super Mario 3, and it's like, yeah, you should play Super Mario World. You should play Super Mario 3. Do not diss Donkey Kong Country. I will fight you. I will fight you about this. It is one of the best games ever made, period.
It's a different kind of platformer, but in the best ways all around, for sure. David Wise, the composer of the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack, I actually got to see him in person at MagFest a couple years back.
All right, I'm pausing my time.
Yeah, that's fair. I got to see him live at MagFest a couple years back, and I got to see Aquatic Ambiance and a couple other songs performed live because he plays the saxophone along with some bands. He's done a bazillion games. He did RC Pro-Am, Narc, Wizards and Warriors. He's done 50 plus game soundtracks, but obviously this one stands out more than any others.
Yes, and my closing statements for this game is, as Mr. Venacore stated, the ad campaign for Sega was Sega does what Nintendo don't, right? And Sonic, his whole vibe was he has attitude, and Mario is like lame, right? It's for kids. Okay, if that's the case, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong are the Spicoli of SNES games, right?
Wow.
They show up to class 30 minutes late, kick their feet up on the desk, and say, what the fuck is up? And then a pizza comes to class in the form of a boss that's a trash can. It's fucking one of the best games ever. You have to play it. It's fucking amazing. They have total I don't give a fuck energy. It's amazing. Okay. Now I'm gonna make a little hat that says snob, because now we're getting into the top 2. We're getting into the danger zone where I'm going to talk about how video games are like art. Now this is me putting on my snob hat. My number 2, Super Nintendo video game, is arguably one of the best games of all time.
I know where he's going.
It is a game that didn't invent its genre, but in my opinion, I think it perfected it, and it may be the best game in its series. The game I am referring to is Super Metroid.
Called it.
Yeah. I saw it back there. I was like, yep, it's going to be that. Yep.
It is not the first Metroidvania by any means, but this game does something that other Metroids and Castlevanias did not do, and still to this day, in my opinion, do not do, which is this. They take advantage of the gameplay premise that you are exploring a very large area completely alone.
Yeah.
This is a song featured in Super Metroid. Song. This is the background. This is what you hear as you play Super Metroid. This is the same console as Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country. And this game has the balls to have this playing as you are just walking solid, just by yourself. You never have felt so alone. And it just is supported. It supports the idea of exploration so well. It is one of the most ambient games, in my opinion, to this day. I, as a child, could not play this game. I watched Buck play it, but I didn't understand what it was about and why it was so good, because it's not a game that you can watch. It's a game that you have to play.
You have to
So
experience
I came back as an adult, like in COVID, and played Super Metroid. And at the end of it, I said, holy shit.
That's when you
This
played
is
it?
one of the best games I have ever played. Number 2 reason, besides the idea of the being solidary, like just, okay, raise your hand if you ever performed in front of a live audience. Okay, have you ever stood in silence in front of a live audience? Like, have you ever just not said anything? If you haven't, let me cue you in, listener. It's the scariest thing ever. Sitting in silence in front of basically saying that you're an artist and you're a performer and then just doing nothing is the bravest thing that you can do. And Super Metroid doesn't say anything.
Mhm.
It doesn't say anything to you. And yet in 2020, in the year 2020, I played it all the way through with no FAQs. With it just
can't
has the best
believe-
visual language I've ever. It's top 5 games of all time for me.
Wow.
But I'm moving on with my remaining time to talk about my favorite Super Nintendo video game. And I think it's my number 3 video game of all time. And this is another one that I think it may be the pinnacle of its series, maybe not of its genre, but in my opinion of its series. I'm talking about a game that will make me cry. I'm very sorry, but I'm talking about Final Fantasy VI, aka Final Fantasy 3.
Hell
Attaboy.
yes.
This game has
my
too many good songs to pull. Too many. I did pull one in particular that I'm going to get to. Let me read from my notes so I don't warble. Okay, Final Fantasy VI is a turn-based RPG set in a world where magic is being revived after many years of separation from our world. An empire motivated by greed and power empowers a madman to destroy the world, while a cast of characters is there to pick up the pieces. Featuring an ensemble cast boasting no real main character.
Fair.
Final Fantasy VI is my favorite RPG. This game has 14 playable characters with 4-person parties. The sprite works for all the 14 characters are legendary. They are so easily identifiable to anyone who likes Final Fantasy. And all of their backstories are just so goddamn rich. Locke, Terra, Edgar, Sabin, Celis, Setzer, Gao, Cyan, Strago, Realm, Shadow, Umaro, Mog, and Gogo. The sheer number of twists and turns, the amount of times that your party gets separated, split up, is Game of Thrones levels of storytelling. You have casts separated on opposite sides of this country, and they're all going through compelling stuff. They're meeting up, they're breaking apart. There's a magic equipment system where you can find espers, which are their names for summons in this game, and you defeat them or you gather them. They sacrifice them to you. You equip them on characters. There's so much to talk about in my notes right here. Memorable moments. Ultros. Period. I'm just, if you played the game,
Yeah, bro.
Ultros.
Yeah.
The attack on Doma, the opera house scene, getting Phoenix for Locke. No spoilers on what happens there. Getting on the waiting on the floating continent for Shadow, and then fucking saving him later at the Cave of Vel, and then fighting him later in the Gladiator Coliseum to get him back into your party. And then my last note just says, Kefka. Listen,
Oh man.
I'm about to go off. I'm about to go off on arguably the unsung top tier villain of the Final Fantasy series, in my opinion, who is obviously completely overshadowed by the confused, brooding Sephiroth, right? Kefka could not be any farther from Sephiroth in demeanor. Words I would use to describe Kefka: ostentatious, conniving, callous, deranged, maniacal, tyrannical. Listen, Kefka is like if the Joker and Hitler had a baby together.
So accurate.
Holy smokes.
That's so accurate.
At the beginning of the game, he starts.
That's dank, man.
At the beginning of the game, he starts like Christoph Waltz's character from Inglourious Bastards, and by the end of the game, he's literally the god of all magic. At one point, you literally watch him beat up Ifra and Sheba like he's a fucking school bully, swirling some fucking dorks. His big mocking laugh paired with his music, which sounds like a carnival, is beating you up. He's Listen, he may be a pretty two-dimensional character, motivationally speaking, but because of this story and its characters these characters are so much easier to sympathize with because the story revolves around his evilness, right? it gives this very like fantasy book vibe to the whole game. The black and white is really clear. Kefka is bad and you're good. It's not like Sephiroth's confused what's happening, who's good and who's bad. In this game, Kefka is just straight up fucking evil, and he's like reverse Goku, I wrote in my notes. The entire
Reverse
story
Goku.
the entire story revolves around characters dealing with him. This game, I got everything in this game. I flew around and fought X Death. I did all the Gladiator Arena shit. I got all the tools. I've only beat this game once, but I played it for 70 hours. And when I got to the end of it, I cried and I felt like a better gamer. Final Fantasy VI is one of the best games of all time, and it is my number one NES game on my Carousel.
Hell yeah, dude!
Hell
I
yeah,
can't
bro.
wait to finish
Hell
it.
yes.
I'm
Well
playing
done.
it right now. I'm so
Oh, man.
damn.
You know, in the new Final Fantasy 14 expansion, one of the new jobs is Pictomancer, and it's just Realm.
It's just Realm.
You use a paintbrush, and the artifact armor is just Realm's outfit from 6.
If you like Final Fantasy, you haven't played Final Fantasy VI, you must go play it. Buck,
What?
begin your carousel.
I'm supposed to follow that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well,
You can do it, buddy.
I'm not gonna lie. For number 5, I kind of bent the rules a little bit.
Go on.
Because 1, we had a conversation, and 2, it's not on my list, so you guys don't know what it is.
Okay.
When I was thinking about this, same kind of thing. I've got a couple of games that are at the top that, again, my top 2 probably would not change, but any of the other 3 could change on maybe any given day. But number 5 is a game that I actually discovered a little bit later. College was 20 years ago for me now, but in college I studied Japanese. That's why you guys saw our Japan episode, and if you didn't, it's fun, but I do speak conversational Japanese. I studied Japanese in college. I took a trip to Japan in college, and I started finding Super Nintendo, Super Famicom games that we didn't have, that we never got over here, things like that, right? And I stumbled upon a little kid that I could translate a bit myself and played originally, and that is Clock Tower.
Ooh,
I remember you talking about that
Whoa! What an upset.
Clock Tower is one of the first horror games that we got for the Super Famicom. We did not get. I actually even bring this up because Way Forward is making one of their port pluses like they did for River City Girls Zero. We are getting Clock Tower this year for modern consoles.
Oh, wow.
The original, but with like cutscenes and updated music, everything else. If you guys don't know what this is, Clock Tower is a point and click horror adventure game. In fact, if you've ever, I linked for you guys in the Discord so you could see a couple of particular scary, spoopy scenes from this game, because if you're familiar with it, we did get these over here in the States. The first Clock Tower was for PS1 for us, and it's the exact same premise. There's a dude named Scissor Man that's chasing you around, and he's scary as
There's
all
a dude
get
named
out.
Scissor Man.
Yeah, he's scary.
You know.
He's chasing you around this house. He's killing off the other girls that are there in the house. And if you're a Dario Argento fan, you've already seen this movie because it's called Phenomena, starring Donald Pleasance and what's her name from Labyrinth?
Yes.
Jennifer Connelly from Labyrinth. I have the trailer for that for you there too. The premise is very much so the same as that movie, except she can't control insects like she can in that movie. There is a scene in the game that throws out an homage to this. This is a point and click game. You click around the screen, you interact with objects, you figure out puzzles. There are multiple endings. There are multiple ways that different characters in the game can die. The one chick, Anne, can be pushed out a window, drowned in the pool outside, slammed down from in the attic down to the foyer floor, down like 2 or 3 stories. Like, some characters can just die multiple ways. And it just... You have a little moniker in the corner of your character's current state of mind, and the more messed up you get, you can no longer fight Scissor Man off. One of the most famous ones is Scissor Man, after killing one of the girls, hiding in the bathtub and then jumping out of the water and scaring every living crap out of you. And I'm so excited that we're getting this over in the States, because when I played this, it was just like when I discovered Sweet Home for the NES. I was like, look what you didn't give to us. Why didn't I get this? I would have bought the crap out of this.
Yeah.
But Human was known for not bringing. Human was the developer. They did not bring a lot of their games to the States. They were all tad a bit quirky.
Deep cut.
That's a good one. Yep. Check it out this year when it's coming out again.
That's
Number 4.
one of the first stalker enemies in games, by the way.
Very much so, right? Like to think
Yeah.
of one that follows you around, like live in certain
Mhm.
respects. I mean, it really is. It didn't really, the genre never took off that greatly. It's still one of the only series to really do that a whole lot. But number 4, no one cares about but me. Secret
No,
of
I
Evermore.
fucking love that game. Sorry, I didn't mean to
There's-
speak over
okay,
you. Secret of
yeah,
Evermore is
but
the
you're
game
right.
you just lifted up.
Secret of Evermore. The reason why I say that is because there are so many other RPGs for this console that get over. I mean, Secret of Mana to name one, and the other Secret series, even though they have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this game a lot. For the same reasons why you kind of like Super Metroid, not of the spooky vibe, but it's just you and your dog. Secret of Mana had the 3 characters. You only really controlled one unless you were using a multi-tap. And so in this one, it was you and the dog was accompanying you. But I loved the alchemy system that it had for being able to put together. There were certain spells that you only got to cast 1 or 2 or 3 times because there weren't enough components to cast them more than that. And trust me, I found them all the trading in the market to do all. I did it. Nintendo powered the shit out of this game. When you went to the different areas in the world you were in, your dog would change. If you remember, when you went to like the medieval area, like in the original one, you're in like BC, and your
That
dog
part
is
was
like
cool.
that was cool, right? Your dog was like a cave dog, and then you went to like the medieval era, and your dog was like a poodle, like prim and proper. When you went to the future, it turned into like a toaster dog. But it's fun. You had a companion. I still enjoyed the action RPG element, even though it was something a little different from Zelda, the way that it played out, right?
Yeah.
But love this one.
Not enough people know about that game.
Yes, that's what I'd say. Not enough people know about Secret of Evermore. Number 3, I gave you some music on because the ambiance. If Super Metroid nails the ambiance of Alone on a Space Station, then being trapped in Count Dracula's castle gets nailed by Super Castlevania 4.
This game looks fucking tight. I remember this being the swinging.
Yes, felt so good. But the thing is, like you said with Super Metroid, they nailed it on the music. They nailed it on the Tom Dubois art, on the manuals and everything else. But they nailed the ambiance of being a Dracula's castle. It was spooky. It was scary.
I'm gonna play the theme as well.
Yes.
Because this music is fucking awesome.
Terrifying at parts. This was the intro stage where
Yeah.
you walk in and there's like no enemies to begin with. There's just gates and whatnot. And literally, as this music starts to
I can hear
crescendo,
it.
you start to run into bats and zombies and whatnot in the front gates.
Fucking shit slaps.
You have to go.
It gets
into
so
the
crazy
front-
later.
You start outside of Dracula's castle. You have to go into Dracula's castle in this stage.
Yes.
Just
Ugh, brilliant game.
it was hard as hell. I did not beat it as a kid. I did not beat it as an adult because it is so difficult.
Yeah.
But I loved how far I could get. I still loved the game, just past like the gold level and whatnot, had the fun. I got a kick out of the fact that the ghost boss, which was Paula Abdul and Fred Astaire, they were the dancing couple.
Yes,
Whoa.
Paul and Fred.
It was funny because it was Paula Abdul, because Paula Abdul's still alive,
Fucking awesome.
and Fred Astaire, who's dead, so they didn't give a shit. They just called him
That's
Fred Astaire.
hilarious.
I don't even think it was like Fred Astaire. It was just Fred Astaire, I think. But just they nailed the ambiance. Again, this was one of those titles like Super Metroid where they just nailed the universe you were playing in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 2. And this would be number 2 only because number 1 is number 1. And I gave you some amazing music for this too. Because
Oh man, number 2.
Mega Man X.
Ba-ba-da-da-ba-ba.
Wow.
Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Fantastic game.
Admittedly so, I only played like Mega Man 1 through 4 a lot on the NES, even though I own them all now. You don't have to fade it out. I love that music. It's like they took that already perfect formula and said that cartoon sprite idea that Mac was talking about with Kirby, right? Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
They nailed it with
Yep.
Mega Man. And the infamous intro scene, which you didn't get really a whole lot in the Mega Man games before, but they did after that every single time. And that was, you didn't choose a robot master. You went right into a level. And as the famous YouTube videos go, they tell you nothing. Like, you're fucking Mega Man. You know what to do. You shoot and you, oh, wait, I can do, wait, no, I can jump and shoot. I can charge this up. Oh, man, I can jump. Oh, I'm going to die. I can cling to the walls and jump up the walls. That's new. Oh, man. You learn by doing, because it's this close to perfect.
Definitely
right?
my favorite Mega Man game for sure.
It really did nail it. I mean, all three of the X's on Super Nintendo, 2 and 3 are very pricey now. 1 is still reasonable.
Yeah.
They all really nailed it with the color palettes, with the master bots, with the story with it, with the upgrades and the way that the armor looks. Mega Man just doesn't feel like little kid Mega Man anymore. He feels like Mega Man
It's
now.
like a badass anime
Like, he
character.
really is kitted out, and when they started adding all the supers and everything, it got a little
Hey,
slick.
hey, Buck. Hey, Buck.
Yeah.
Hadouken.
I don't get.
See our Easter egg episode.
They introduced Zero, the character Zero, to the series,
Oh,
who is
my
an amazing
favorite.
character now.
Yeah.
They introduced Vile, who was
Yep.
in more than a few as well, which was a great, like, villain, anti-hero, whatever you want to call him. But
Sigma.
yes, and Sigma ended up
Yep.
being your big bad. We didn't
Yep,
need to
yep.
bring Dr. Wily back, because now we were Reploid hunters, so we
Yep,
were hunting
yep.
after computer viruses.
Great game.
Absolutely wonderful. Probably one of the best West Mega Mans, best Mega Mans,
West
in
Mega
the
Mans.
series. Dr.
Yep.
Dr. Wily. I'm Dr. Wily.
Dr. Wiley.
If not the best Mega Man in the
Oh,
series.
yeah?
Number 1. If you guys have ever heard me, just pick any one off YouTube, Mac. I don't care.
Yeah.
If you guys have ever heard me talk about video games in general, this is probably my favorite video game of all time. While I concede that number 6 might be a better game, my favorite is number 2/4. Final Fantasy
Beautiful.
2/4.
It's just as good. It's so fucking good.
Do you have the four fiends or something cute? Oh my gosh! Just
I
you can
will
pick any
concede
track
to
from
you,
No,
Mac,
that's
or
not
to you,
how it
Buck,
works.
that 2 had better music.
2 probably did have better music.
No
I mean,
question.
between the theme of Baron, the main theme, the theme of love, the Four Fiends theme, Golbez's theme,
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
the dwarves underground.
Yeah.
This has some killer and much more memorable tracks. I mean, everybody remembers the Opera House from 6, maybe Zozo, the Coliseum, but that was just a looping, like 5-second track, really. Yeah, and that might be one of the biggest reasons that it clings to number 1 on almost all these lists for me. It's not the longest Final Fantasy, which is nice. You know, you can beat it in give or take 20 hours, not super long. The story is super traditional, medieval fantasy love story, right? It has the love triangle a little bit. It has the big bad turn not so big bad, not so many spoilers, but go check that part out for sure. I love RPGs with 5 character parties. I absolutely love them. This has front and back line, you know, is one of those games that introduced that. If you ever played Lost Odyssey or seen that game by Mistwalker, who's made up of some original Squaresoft devs, including Uematsu doing the music and whatnot, 5 character party where the main character is like a paladin and his wife is like the white mage, and there's these twins that do white and black magic. Am I ringing a bell with any? There's a Cid. Lost Odyssey has a Cid.
Right.
So it's basically like a spiritual successor to this game. But all of those things just coupled together, you care about all those characters. Just like Final Fantasy VI, while there may be a main character in this game, you could pick any one of them to be your main character, right? And when they've done reiterations of this game, you can mix up your end game party. You can take Tella and Yang and Palem and Porum and the others with you if you want to the end. So this has been expanded upon so many cool times that it's a good chance to play it. I have probably played and beaten this game like 20 times between all the different iterations.
Damn.
So,
That's a fantastic one.
I mean, it's come out so many different times. It will not be the first. It's not the first and not the last time you'll hear me talk about Final Fantasy II, because it is a masterpiece.
That's right.
I think
It fucking is.
Final Fantasy II is probably my favorite design for Sid. Honestly, I like the dude with the beard and the
Yeah,
goggles.
the big
Airship-
beard.
Airship
He's
Sid?
very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
With
I
the
like him a
hammer.
lot.
He's very
Dwarf
good.
Sid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dwarf
Yeah,
Sid. Yeah,
kind of dwarf, but not really a dwarf.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that game is also it's a must play. It's a must
Yeah,
play.
Kane the Dragoon. It's the reason why I
Cecil,
played
yeah.
main to Dragoon of Final Fantasy 14. It's one of my favorites.
Very
always.
very fantasy too. Very focused.
Yes.
Raph, your carousel, sir.
Okay, well, my carousel is starting with a LucasArts game. And this LucasArts game is called Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Zombies Ate My
Yay!
Neighbors.
Oh,
This guy.
great
Yeah,
choice.
so this game,
Good stuff.
I was doing research on it when I was like kind of preparing for this, and apparently it wasn't very well received when it first came out, and I didn't know this because I had
Oh,
such
really?
a blast playing it. It's if you don't know what it is, it's a game where you play as this guy and his I guess like little sister or his sister. You guys are running around trying to save your neighbors from zombies in the neighborhood, and it's just this cool sort of like I wouldn't call it like a shoot 'em up. I don't know. You're just exploring the map, trying to save the neighbors, kill zombies, and get out, and get to the
Big babies.
next part of the neighborhood. Really, really cool game, and I have a very specific memory. Not really playing this as a child, but as an adult, actually, right around the end of like the pandemic. I went with my then girlfriend to a local bar here in Orlando that had an arcade cabinet that had like I guess like the SNES Mini, the one that has like a bunch of
Mhm.
games
The
preloaded on
classic,
there.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of these was Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and I showed her the game for the first time. We kind of sat there playing it for a while and had a really good time. It was one that I remember, like I said, this console and the previous console are ones that involved a lot of sleepovers and late nights,
Mhm.
and this was one of the games that we played a lot growing up. So that's my number 5, Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
Nice choice.
My number 4 is a video game adaptation to Hamlet for children, in my opinion, which is The Lion King. That's
Yes,
what it is.
that's
It's Hamlet
right.
for
It is
children.
Hamlet for children.
Right?
Oh man.
Everything the light touches.
Everything the light touches. If you haven't played the Super NES Lion King, it's a fantastic game that looks gorgeous, has great music. Obviously, it's the music from the movie, especially that second level. I think the second world with the I can't wait. I just can't wait to be king.
Mhm.
As a kid, I was like, damn, this is like the hardest thing I've ever played. And then
Yeah.
I got past that level and I got to the part where you're in the elephant graveyard, and I was like, no, this is the hardest
Now
freaking thing.
this is
It was Super Nintendo syndrome
Yeah.
of that thing. It was like a battle of attrition, right?
Yeah.
It was like, if I can get further, all right, I got better at that. Now I can
Yeah.
get further, all right, I got better at that.
got
Now this
better.
one's easy.
Yeah, that
right?
game's rough.
Now,
And it's funny, this is a game that I never beat, but I did see my sister's then boyfriend at the time, now my brother-in-law. I got to watch him beat it. He beat Scar as adult Simba, and I was just like blown away by that. I was just like,
nice.
first of all, these sprites look gorgeous. Like this
Yeah.
game, talk about cartoon.
Talk about I was just about to say.
in getting to play your favorite cartoons.
Yeah.
That's what this was, man. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous game.
Yep.
But now I'm gonna move into my top 3.
Yeah.
And my top 3. First, I'm gonna go with my number 3, which is I had a really hard time deciding on these 3 because, like you said, any one of these 3 could be my number 1. But my number 3 is gonna be Super Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo.
Nice.
This
Awesome.
game, probably like the most amount of hours that I've spent playing a game is just this, like with friends, with my sister, with my mom at some point, probably. Like I'm pretty sure I played this with my parents at some point. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
it's just
facts.
a universally fun game. As an adult, turned it into a drinking game that is fun as hell. Got me super sloshed.
Go see our drinking game
Yes.
episodes for more on that.
Yeah, watch that one. That's a good one.
isn't it funny how they nailed that formula like right away? I mean,
Right,
Mario
yeah,
64 is
it's
one of my favorites, but did they
perfect.
change it really? I mean,
No.
No, I mean, obviously with the physics of the mechanics of like the systems and all that stuff, they got better. But really, it's the same core
Yeah.
gameplay. You're just
Nintendo
Racing.
invented another genre.
like
Like
go-kart racing.
racing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's
Everything from Crash Bandicoot to the Final Fantasy Chocobo racing.
it's kind of like what they did
To
with
Dragon Kart and Yakuza.
Right.
Super Smash Brothers. It's not a real fighting game, but it is a
Right.
fighting game. It's
Right,
it's
right.
a very Nintendo fighting
It's
game.
the card of racing. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And actually gonna dive right into my my number 1 and number 2 were difficult for me.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna go with my number 2 being Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's
Blasphemy.
Conquest.
No, I'm
What's
just-
that? What'd you say?
Hell
You said
yeah.
Blasphemy. I said.
Yeah,
Raph, don't listen to them. Beautiful
you know what?
choice.
We've
No,
talked
it's
about
a great
this.
game.
I've talked about this with Mac extensively. I understand completely. Like honestly, Donkey Kong Country 1, I think is a more well-designed game. 100%. I think it's a more well-designed game. It feels really good to play. But there's something about Diddy's Conquest. I played it more, I think, growing up. And I'm not sure why. I ended up playing a lot more. Something about like the scope of it. And my top 2 games both have a couple of things in common, and that's the secrets in them. There's a lot of secrets. There's a whole secret world in Diddy's Conquest that I
Right.
never got to, and I got to it, but I never really figured it out because it felt mysterious and weird to me. Like this game almost scared me a little bit. I was just like,
Me
this is-
too.
it's hard, it's weird, it's different from Donkey Kong Country. It's less comforting.
The
it
toll
feels
guy that
like-
you have to pay, and I remember being
Yeah,
like, "What the
yeah,
fuck? Like what?"
dude. Right, and like you have to get quite a few coins for that. Those Kremlin or Cruel coins, I think is what they're called. I
Yeah.
don't remember, but yeah, it's just a really gorgeous looking game. I think too. The whatever pre-rendered backdrops they use for it, and the pre-rendered sort of like polygonal like 3D characters that they use that they did in Donkey Kong Country also look really gorgeous in this game. Really good color palette. It's a little bit darker than the first game, which I think kind of like
Mhm.
attracted me. I'm not sure why. But yeah, while I will concede that I think that Donkey Kong Country 1 is definitely a more well-designed game, I did have a lot of fun as a child with Donkey Kong Country 2. I
That's
love
fair.
that game. It's
If you
kind of
look
just
into
holds
the
a
way
special
that they
place in my heart.
designed the characters for those games, they knew
Yeah.
they knew that the Super Nintendo couldn't do 3D, right?
Yeah.
So what they did was they designed those characters in 3D, and then they flattened them to make this to make them work as sprites.
Mm.
Right.
That's what gives them that really cool look to them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then my number 1, dude, it's the most basic bitch sort of game, but dude, I
No,
love
dude.
Super Mario World, man.
Hey,
I
all
played this game
right,
100 billion
all
times. I
What's
played it
wrong
last
with that?
night.
Raph, hell yeah.
It's
I
amazing.
played it last night in preparation for this, and I fucking love this game. It's not even. Yeah, dude, like the music is good.
Right to
It's
the end, huh?
if Super Mario Brothers 3 feels like a stage play, this feels like a storybook. It's
Mhm.
I don't know. It just feels like I'm playing through some sort of a fairy tale, and like I'm the star of it. Mario's looks super adorable. Yoshi's in it. Like
Hell yeah.
I don't know, man. I fucking love this game. I've played it, like just 1,000 times. Every single time that I jump into it, I have a blast with it. I sit there, I either get really, really angry at it, but then I come back like 10 minutes later, jump back into it. I'm like, okay, took a deep breath. I'm back in. And I've beat it 100 times too. But I will say with this one, like I said with Diddy's Conquest, it's the secrets. There's a whole secret star world that
Right.
I never entirely fully figured out as a child. My sister did. She ended up getting all of those. But it's a game that's easy to beat, but very, very hard to master and to 100% it. It's a game that has a lot more depth than people realize for it.
Yeah.
And then I realize now that my copy has a big old crack in the back. I don't even know how the hell that happened.
Oh no!
Yeah. It still functions. It
Crack
still
works.
kills. Crack
Still
kills.
works, man.
We'll just swap it for the back of a Madden or something. We're gonna
There
throw
you
away
go.
anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just switch it out. Yeah.
It's
but
not
yeah, dude,
basic to pick. It's one of the best. It's one of the best games.
There's a
Hell yeah,
reason
dude.
why it's so popular. There's
Yeah.
a reason why it's just so infinitely
one
playable,
seller.
dude.
Yep.
Yeah.
Number 1 seller.
Fucking
It's-
Yoshi. Period. Yoshi.
Yeah, no, Yoshi,
Suck it.
the
Yoshi.
design
Yep.
for Yoshi. I mean, look at the font. Like, look at the
Yeah,
font
dude.
on this
Yeah.
this
It's
right here. Just-
perfect for the Super Nintendo.
Miyamoto knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. It's
I
fucking
absolutely
genius.
Still
love
does.
this.
Aw.
He's a fucking
100%.
genius. Excellent
will be-
pick. Raph's number 1. Super Mario World. Mr.
Hell yeah.
Venicor, take us home with your carousel, please.
All right, I'm gonna try to be respectful of time. I know we're running long on this one, but it's for a good reason. Damn it,
Yeah.
Super
It's
Nintendo's
hard
the greatest
to-
system
yeah,
of all
it's-
time.
it's the best.
I'm gonna jump right in. Number 5, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom.
Nice.
Ooh.
Nice pick.
If you
knew
have
he's gonna
never
dig
played
deep on
this game,
RPG.
I'm about to get fucking crazy on RPGs with you.
Yeah.
If you have never heard of this game before, this is the closest thing I can think of that had that 80s and 90s anime feel going on
Yep.
while still being a very, very strong RPG. And in my opinion, it has one of the best twists of any RPG of the generation.
Oh, I don't know what you're
There was
referring
there is
to.
this massive twist that you do not see coming about 2/3 of the way through this game, maybe a little farther, that really takes your breath away and like sets it up for this massive emotional finale.
Wow, that's a great number 5. I can't. How can
Yeah,
it go?
dude.
It's gonna go up
Yeah.
from there.
I know.
Yeah.
Damn.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny. As far as like my top RPGs of all time go, the Lunar series is way up there, and that's Sega CD. This is the closest thing you're going to get to a Lunar game on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Mm,
In a lot of
interesting.
ways. In a lot of ways, it doesn't have that like move around the board combat kind of deal, but
The
if you
anime
play
of
it,
it all.
you'll know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's got that bright, beautiful, colorful anime feel to it.
Yeah.
And you know, for me, that was everything back then. It was just so unique and so.
And now.
yeah,
right.
Right.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
telling you. All right, and just as a preface, I removed Final Fantasy VI from my list because Mac is covering it. It's still one of my absolute adored favorites, but didn't want to be redundant, so I got a little creative.
I love that.
Number 5. Let's jump right over to Secret of Mana, guys. Let's go right over to
Ooh,
Secret of Mana.
nice.
Very good choice.
Action RPG, right? RPG adjacent.
Mhm.
You had the 3-person party. It was one of the few RPGs to be able to actually use the multi-tap peripheral and let you play with 3 people on screen at the same time in an action RPG. My
That game
God, that was
slaps.
unheard of at the time. The characters were, this is becoming a theme for me, I guess, just big and bright and colorful and beautiful and well drawn. Again, it had that anime feel to me. If
Mhm.
you look at the what's it called in Japanese, Seikan Densetsu or whatever,
Seiken Densetsu, yeah.
Seiken Densetsu. And oh, by the way, the brand newest one just got announced about a month and a
Visions
half
of
ago.
Mana.
Commercial
Very
is so
exciting.
touching.
Visions of Mana. The
You
Visions
see
of
the
Mana
Japanese
commercial.
One? It's the Japanese one you
The
saw?
Japanese one is
It's
so
so sweet.
good. It's
Yeah.
like a little story.
Ugh.
Oh, just awesome. Secret of
Yeah.
Mana had some of the best music out there in the Super NES era. It had some of the most satisfying action combat. It had those RPG elements that you wanted to see, leveling up your weapons, leveling up your character skills. And what was really cool is like every time you leveled up a weapon proficiency from level 1 all the way to level 9, the charge move, the ultimate attack for that weapon would just get more and more spectacular.
Mhm.
Every weapon in that game had its own series of like little mini limit breaks, I would call them. So by the time you leveled a weapon up fully, and if you held the B button and charged that thing all the way to level 9 and then let go, you were rewarded with this just spectacular like super move for whatever weapon you were holding.
Very anime.
It was.
With the
It
whole
was
thing,
very
yeah.
like, prepare for my ultimate attack. You know,
That's what I think is
kinda
that
like-
that whole series must be more popular in Japan, and I wish that weren't the case. I wish America got more love for that series.
yeah.
It's a fucking awesome game.
And okay, let's go to number 3, Earthbound.
Oh, hey!
I
had to
Earthbound.
struggle enough with this
Oh,
on my list.
baby!
It
God damn!
stinks.
This
I had to
game
struggle
literally
enough with this on my
stinks.
list.
Do you know why that is? Because
what?
it has scratch and sniff cards
What?
that actually let
What?
you smell some of the characters.
No way!
I didn't.
Yeah, bro.
We got another viral clip on our hands. I did not know
What?
this. What are you talking about?
Earthbound, like Zombies Ate My Neighbors, had really stupid,
Hang on a sec.
poor marketing.
Hang on a sec. This fungus is no fun at all. What? Hang on. What is this
What?
scratch here? Oh, it smells like dirt. Ew.
What
And
the
you can
hell?
actually you can smell along. You can smell,
Smell
along
along,
as you
kids.
play.
Then you-
And there's a boss-o-meter on the back of each card with like info on the bosses and stuff like that.
Vinny, I'm
This
sorry to
was
interrupt, but I gotta ask: do the smells like are they still in there? Do they still
yeah,
smell?
they still
Yeah. Oh
Wow.
no way!
Yeah, dude.
Incredible.
There
Okay.
was a
I'm
whole
sorry.
The
ad
Go
mole,
ahead.
the
campaign
mole.
that said this game
Oh,
stinks.
it's
That's
awful.
awesome.
You could only buy
That one's really
Earthbound.
bad.
You could only buy Earthbound in the States
Wow.
in a big old box with the game and the strategy
Oh,
guide. You could not
spicy
get
dog.
the game without that
Ugh.
strategy guide, and
Wow.
it was
Love
all
it.
part of
I
their
love it.
campaign for it. And they doomed the
Ugh.
game from the beginning
That's
to
fucking
not
hilarious.
to not
And
sell
guys,
That is so
Buck,
silly.
this is right for Buck. There's literally a card that is just a fart.
Wow.
well. It's perfect.
This
Perfect.
oh,
Perfect. I'm
Earthbound,
gonna
please,
smell it.
yeah.
Right. I'm gonna smell it for you right now. This is the Earthbound scratch and sniff fart.
This
Pack it up,
game
boys,
has
we're done.
such
Oh, it's
excellent
so
vibes.
bad. It stinks.
It's so funny
We're
that this
done.
game is right up
It's-
there in the top tier RPGs of this console. Like it's like it's right alongside this fucking epic one where this guy's destroy the one is where you this kid when you're fucking fighting a fart, and it's like
I have
let's
to tell
fucking
you,
go.
one of the biggest draws of the Super Nintendo,
Yep,
the
mini.
SNES Classic, the
Mhm.
mini, is that it is a very easy, accessible way to get a playable copy of Earthbound.
Yep.
It's like a
And look at the
Wii U.
back of this thing. I
Yep.
mean, my God,
Yeah.
like 3 of my top 5 games are on the back of this
Same,
thing. So
yep.
that was an instant buy for me.
Earthbound Loose is up to like $350.
Shit.
Wow.
So it's like it's not an accessible game to play. It's such a great game.
Yeah.
Yeah, Buck was telling me the complete box with the book and everything is like ungodly at
Oh
this point.
shit, I bet.
Like almost $2,000.
One of the strangest RPGs of all time, Earthbound.
Yeah.
Blast.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Earthbound is
awesome.
weird. Earthbound is really
It is,
weird.
yeah.
In an era where everything was like high fantasy and medieval and
Yep.
magic and stuff, Earthbound was the exact opposite. You started it. I mean, if you've played Smash Brothers, you know you've seen Ness and Lucas and some of the Earthbound characters.
Yep.
That's probably where most people have first encountered Ness, the protagonist of Earthbound. But for the first time, you're this regular kid. Well, not quite regular, but you're this kid who's running around with a baseball bat and finding burgers in the garbage can and eating them as your health potion.
Yes.
By the way, our buddies Trash Burger, the band, named their band off of the garbage
I didn't know
burger in
that.
Earthbound. Trash Burger, we love you. You got the best mashups out there.
They opened for Bit Brigade the other night.
Hell yeah, they're great. I love Trash Burger. They're great. They're a great act. All right, moving on to number 2, guys. Somebody had to do it. Link to the
Yeah,
Past.
dude.
Oh,
Fuck,
dude.
dude. It's so good. Oh man, it's so good.
Would you like to see a almost completely sealed version, complete with the Woolworths sticker on it?
Oh, baby,
nice.
that's beautiful. I love it. This is my original copy. So this is my 1993, 1994 copy. Guys, I mean, come on. Zelda is one of those defining games. It's its own thing. It's the original overworld top down, dungeon delving. Everything was just so right about it, and it had those great mechanics of you had to go into this dungeon to get this weapon to be able to get into the next dungeon. It had continuity. It had a great flow about it, and
Great flow.
really just gorgeous and such memorable music.
Yes.
Such memorable music. And Zelda Link to the Past, I don't know if I have it around here, but for those of you who were Nintendo Power kids back in the day, there was actually a comic book that you would get an issue every Nintendo Power, and it was about a year, and it was a Zelda comic, and they did the same with Mario. It was based on Link to the Past, and later on, via the Nintendo Power store, you were actually able to buy the entire thing as a self-contained graphic novel, and I have it somewhere around here.
Shit.
When I find
know
it,
that.
I'll show it off.
Dope.
That game is while I didn't put it on my list because in my head, if I'm gonna tell someone to play Zelda, I might tell them to play another one. But I'll say this: I didn't live it firsthand, but I bet having Zelda 2 for years and years and years, and then Link to the Past comes.
Yeah,
Full,
dude.
and you're like, oh god, they made it good. They made it so good. Like it
know,
went
when
from not so good to
Yeah.
great.
I
Like
can find the comic.
I was first exposed to it because our cousin Shane came into town and he brought his copy and he was like, Buck, check this out. And when he walked through that first dungeon, when Link's feet walked from the tile into a puddle and the audio changed, my mind just exploded. I'm like, that's so cool. If it does that, how many other like cool pieces and attention to
Dude,
detail is this
yeah.
gonna be in? When you shoot an arrow and it hits the wall across the room and goes
Yeah.
Tink.
Right, hitting a
Yeah.
shield, then
Guys,
bouncing off the shield.
Link to the Past was such a beloved game for me. It's one of those games I could play over and over and over again and the boss fights are memorable. It originated some of the prevalent boss mechanics that we have in a lot of games these days. I believe came from Link to the Past. I couldn't find the comic, but Mac, to yours, I found my original Final Fantasy III strategy guide with the Babbage's sticker on it from 1995.
Babbage's.
What a deal! What a deal!
Yeah. This is back with strat. I mean,
1995.
look at the amount of Amano art in this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, my fucking
I mean,
favorite, dude.
look at Celis.
So what a fantastic game.
it's-
It was a beautiful
God.
range of character designs.
Look at that.
Ooh,
Oh,
Esper Terra.
Esper Terra, yeah.
I mean, the sheer amount of Amano art in this makes it worth it. I mean, there's Typhon. I'm sure
You're gonna say
Ultros is
Chupin?
in here somewhere. No, he's
Oh
Mr.
my God.
Typhon.
That's
And
funny.
guys, last but not least, and we'll wrap this thing up. You
What
do
do we
not
got?
you do
What do we
not
got?
fucking see this coming. You will not see this coming ever. Legend of the Mystical Ninja is my
Wow,
number one
dude.
Super Nintendo game.
Get this
of
guy
all
to
time.
Japan pronto.
Yeah.
Gambare Goemon.
How
in
did
Japan.
you? Yeah, I want to know the backstory of how this became your favorite. game.
Available, right?
Yeah, right.
I
Exactly.
made it-
That's I'm like, how do you?
Yeah.
I made a YouTube short about this. I made some retro shorts on YouTube like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and this is easily one of my most beloved games. It's this weird amalgamation of like an adventure action RPG with shit tons of mini games and really cool boss dungeons. And it's just dripping with Japanese, like traditional Japanese flavor.
Yeah, it
So it's
is.
Yakuza.
Do what?
He said so Yakuza.
right?
So
Well, that's
Yakuza.
why-
So
No,
Yakuza.
Every
it
game
all- it
just
all
ends
makes
up being
sense.
Yakuza.
It all
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense now.
But you could actually you could plug a second controller in and you would have Kid Ying and Dr. Yang together going through this side-scrolling town. It was like this side-scrolling town navigating adventure where you would go into the little shops and you would buy upgrades for your weapons and kill all the little monsters that enemies and monsters that would come out and grab the yen coins and grab the scrolls so you could power your ninjutsu, and then you would fight your way to the boss level, the boss zone, and defeat the boss of each, and that would advance the story and take to the next one. The third world was this carnival, which literally you had like 4 screens of different carnival games you could play, and they were all good. There was dog racing, there was a dog track. You could bet on the dogs, you could do Snake, you could do the memory game. There were mazes that you found prizes in.
God, it looks adorable.
Venny, do you remember where you got it from or where you bought that game or what turned you onto that game?
So check this out. It was my most rented game of all time.
Wow.
My grocery store that my
Wow.
mom shopped at when I was a kid had a little video game section, and for $1.05 you could rent any game that they have. And I asked, the deal was if I came to the grocery store with her, I was allowed to rent a Super Nintendo game.
Got to.
And I rented Legend of the Mystical Ninja probably 20 times.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
And so the next year she bought it for me as a Valentine's present, probably from
Aw.
Kmart or Babbage's.
I was going to say, all I could think was, where did she probably went, oh my gosh, I have to find this game. Like, I don't remember really seeing
Right.
it in stores around us that much.
We had a pretty robust selection because we
Very
had a
primo.
Babbage's and a Software Etc. in the same mall before they all became GameStop.
Right,
Sure.
right, yeah.
But
I can remember on more than one occasion wanting a game and having a hard time tracking it down before like the Funko Land days where you can mail order.
Right.
I should ask her. She probably will remember because my mom was always like super into like all the game stuff with me, and she loved to watch. And yeah, that was a
Wow.
big thing for
That's
us.
just
But
cool. Like if you wanted to buy Earthbound back then, like you just no, we don't. What's that game? We
No.
don't carry that.
Yeah.
What's that? Mario? You want Mario, kid?
almost every game I bought in the Super Nintendo era, I reserved in advance at our Babbage's at the mall. because we knew the lady who was the manager. And so she would have the reservation list and always got me on the list for if I wanted a game. And I eventually worked for her when I turned 16 and had my first job at Software Etc. because she managed both stores. Great history
Gaming
around
in his blood. Since
early
the
games.
earliest
Man.
days. This guy's
Yeah,
playing
that's
Final
so cool.
Fantasy 1 and Legend of the Mystic
Yeah, that's
Ninja.
pretty hard. Huh? I was a
Legend of the
Toys R Us
Mystical
kid. I was all about the giant slips of paper on
You
the
don't wanna
wall
grow up.
owed box art.
Yes.
Yeah.
You pull the slip of paper and you bring it to the counter.
I would
Wow.
love nothing more than to find like a handful of those. I've been collecting Blockbuster cases over the years through Retro because we'll get them in sometimes with lots.
I desperately want you guys to see this game played at some point. If I have to get my system out and do a little Let's Play recording, I will. This game is adorable and it's so much fucking fun and has so much personality and humor. And the dialogue is hilarious. It's just it's so much fun. It's the pinnacle of fun on the Super Nintendo for me, and that is why I
Yes.
love this game.
I love the design of the main character. It's very Shin-chan. Like,
Yeah,
very,
that's
like,
Goemon.
chibi, very
That's Goemon.
Japanese.
Japanese
yeah.
culture
From the
Yeah.
Goemon
Right.
games.
Yeah, they made it in 64. They made two on the
Yes,
N64.
unfortunately, I
Two.
do
Mhm.
remember those ones not being as hotness.
Yeah,
The
good
64
stuff.
one. Wow.
Oh, this was so much fun.
What
I'm
a
so glad we did
kick-ass
Super
carousel.
Nintendo.
What a deep ass cut for Mr. Venacor's final pick.
So-
That was fucking out of left field
so-
and really tight.
Who's
That-
going to do the PSA?
What is that?
Who's going to do the
We
PSA?
should do a little
Look, guys, PSA.
We have to
We
call
all,
it
we
out.
all know the Chrono
Oh.
Trigger's perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah,
it's-
we
it's-
literally
get it.
were like-
it's not on our lists. We get
Yeah.
it.
We almost omitted it basically because we didn't want to fight over it.
Literally.
That's
literally.
a pretty good way to
Yeah.
put it.
It's one of those things that our carousel is the personal top 5, the ones that had the most meaning or some connection for you. And as much as we all admit Chrono Trigger is one of the greatest RPGs ever made, there's no question. It just, for whatever reason or not, didn't make the cut. Sorry.
If you've listened to every episode of the podcast, then you know that Buck bought Lunar instead of Chrono Trigger, and so that's why it didn't make my
I have
list.
a
And I
Sega
didn't
CD
play it
also.
growing up.
And
Buck is right on so many
Yeah,
occasions.
yeah, Lunar is
Yeah.
pretty kick ass.
Venny just so happened to be in that same boat. And then in Mac's case, if I didn't own it, then he didn't get to play it.
Nope.
Yeah.
And one of our buddy Ben did not have a Sega CD, so picked and heard about Chrono Trigger and picked it up. So he played it, was constantly telling me how cool Chrono Trigger was. I was constantly telling him how cool Lunar was. So I had to go back and play Chrono Trigger after 2 Lunar games. So I love it too.
We love Chrono Trigger. Don't yell at us. But if you would like, make sure to like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment on this video about what your favorite Super Nintendo game
How
is.
wrong we were. Tell us how wrong we are.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll take it. I'll take
I'm
our
okay with that,
lashings.
yeah.
And you're like, Earthworm Jim is the best fucking game I've ever played.
Earthworm Jim is
I had
good.
to think about it. I had to think about it.
Yeah.
Go check us out on Instagram and TikTok.
Earthworm Jim.
And you can always find all of our links at our linktree /the GTP. We want to thank Crunkwitch for the use of our theme song, Clash of the Droids. And of course, we would like to thank RetroGameTreasure.com. Owned and operated by the Megabuck. Retro Game Treasure is a subscription service that sends collectors bespoke boxes of video games every month. I'm talking every console generation from Atari to the PS4. Simply make your profile at www.retrogametreasure.com and you'll receive games that are tailored to fill out your collection. So that means you tell them you don't like sports games, right? They'll never get a sports games. You tell them that you want PlayStation 2 games, you're going to get PlayStation 2 games. Simple as that. RetroGameTreasure.com, obsessed with video games since 1985. Buck, hit me with those new subscribers.
Hey, we got some new subscribers this week. Dallas Howell, Ezequiel Laureano, Oscar Pierce, Dennis Miller, Jeff Benitez, David Palati.
And Venacor, you had something.
I have a question. I got my hand up. Can
Yes.
I address the
Yes,
class,
sir.
please?
Yes,
I
sir.
thought he was just excited about the PS2.
I am. Buck, I've been meaning to ask you this, and this is it's kind of perfect timing because talking about retro. I genuinely don't know the answer to this question. So those retro consoles that you have, like the one that Raph bought, they actually have the slots to put the actual retro games in, like
Yes.
the NES, SNES, Genesis. And so does it connect via HDMI or
Yes.
do you really? So you don't have to have like an AV CRT set up or anything?
kind of the whole. Yes, that's kind of the whole point, that they all have a native HDMI output. Purists
Damn.
will tell you that, like, scan lines and it doesn't look quite
Yeah,
as good,
yeah.
and yada yada.
Right.
Exactly. If you want accessibility to play the games, that is the whole point. The one that
damn.
the one like what RAF has is a little bit better in my opinion than the Retron 5. The Retron 5 gives you the accessibility for all of them, but the Retron 5 it plays Game Boy and Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo and Super Famicom and Nintendo and Famicom and Genesis and Mega Drive, all that shit.
Wow.
But it takes the games, dumps them to the R word, and then you play them from pseudo emulation, basically.
Interesting.
So that one, more than most, has emulation symptoms. A weird sound bug here, problem with sprites there. You cannot play Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse on a Retron 5 because it would explode.
Gotcha.
But the
I'll have
ones
to
that are
ask
more
you about it
direct-
later. Yeah.
But the ones that are more
Yeah.
direct hardware,
Specifics.
like RAFs, work a little bit better for that.
You can buy one of those systems and so much more at RetroGameTreasure.com. Isn't that right, Buck?
Yeah. We have a console shop, so you can buy Retrons. You can buy original consoles, like original N64s and original consoles. You can buy dust covers. You can buy acrylic protectors for your games. You can buy acrylic protectors like this to put your games in.
So if you're not a
You've
collector
got
right
N64
now,
expansion packs. Oh my
we
god.
did-
That's
If you're not a
crazy.
collector now and you want to become a collector,
Yeah.
no better place to start than RetroGameTreasure.com. But in the meantime, my name is Max Stein, and I love the Game Treasure podcast. It's so bad.
So bad.